today we have Amy on the show, also known as Neuro, Spice and All Things Nice.
The amazing Amy shares with us her personal journey and the fight to getting Jack, her son, into the right specialist school, which led her to her business today.
The Spectrum Sendicate. Amy, hello.
Hello. Hi,
Thank
Amy.
you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
Amy, also known as Neuro, Spice, All Things Nice on Instagram, is here today. And it would be amazing if you could just tell us about your journey and where you are today with everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a wild journey way over a decade. So I've got two children, but my eldest, Jack, is... got very complex neurodivergent needs. So he was officially diagnosed autistic at 4. And I can talk you about how we got to that diagnosis first.
Red flags.
Yeah, so I noticed, and actually we've spoken previously, that obviously other guests that you've had, and I know with both of your children, they had regressions, and that's also what really was your sort
Funny you say that, because I was actually talking to Sophie yesterday about regressions, because I did a post on the red flags with my daughter. Can she have a regression if I saw the signs so early? Because she didn't. I mean, at 9-10 months is when I basically noticed that something wasn't normal.
Yeah.
But before then, you said that she did have eye contact.
Yeah,
she was engaging.
Minimal,
she was smiling.
But she was never speaking at that age at 9-10 months anyway. A typical child doesn't. So I don't really know if it was a massive regression or it was just it never
there.
progressed. Yeah, it was never there.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's the thing. Every child is different, and that's why it's called a spectrum. Right? Every child presents differently, and I think with Jack never had any regressions. He was always really advanced in his milestones. He was walking at 10 months. He was speaking in full sentences at 18 months old and counting to 20. And I was just like, my child's a genius, you know. Yeah. But alongside that, I knew there were differences with him, but I didn't know what.
It's funny. It's just a mother's instinct, isn't it?
It is. And there were things. So I've got a really close group of friends. There's like 10 of us, all been friends since school, and 6 of us all had our first child within like 3 months of each other.
I love
So actually, yes, it was great. We was all on maternity leave together. We got to do all like the sort of play groups together. But that was the real marker for me of seeing, that's where I saw the differences. Because all of their children really excelled socially with each other. You know, they all got on really well. They loved going to the play groups. Jack hated it every minute. We'd walk into a playgroup and within 10 minutes we'd have to leave. And hindsight's a wonderful thing. You know, looking back now, I know it was sensory overload, but at the time I was just like, why don't you want to be here? Why don't you want to have fun with these people? Like, what's wrong? Yeah. Because he would get so overwhelmed, he would literally throw up on himself. Yeah. And I'd be like, we've got to go. So then I'd have to leave, get in the car. He would just pass out from exhaustion. And I'd just sit there and cry because
that's exactly my story.
My friends are in there having the time of their life, all enjoying themselves. And I can't be part of that, you know. And I remember just thinking, what's wrong with you? You know, and that's exactly how I felt. But I didn't tell anybody. Because in other ways, he presented so typically, right?
So what sort of age was this that you started?
So this was at like sort of from around 12 months old, right? Okay. And I could see, and I knew that, you know, if we were at home, I was the only person who was allowed to touch him. He couldn't cope if the house phone rang. You know, it was very much more the sensory side of things that I noticed first. But again, autism at this point didn't even come onto my radar because my only understanding at this time of autistic children were children who had delayed development, didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, and he was none of those things.
See, we said this just before, didn't we? Because you said that's how you always looked at autism, whereas I looked at it totally different. I looked at it as in what Jack's like. I looked at it as overly bright, sensory to noise, sounds, touch.
Me too.
Not the non-verbal, like you would look at it.
So it's funny how everyone has that preconception before you have real life experience.
Yeah.
So I had all these fears, but I was thinking, oh, you're a first-time mum. What are you to know? And I just, you know what, I just accepted him for who he was. And I just worked with what I knew worked for him. So we stopped going to the play groups, right? But he could cope if a friend came round to play.
Because he was in his safe place.
It was in his safe space.
Did he play with the child?
No, very much alongside. And he was very, and what we did, I know he was very sort of precious over certain toys. Mm-hmm. So I would remove those toys when other children would come round and just, he would help me choose what toys he would be happy to play with. But then it was like, they'd play and he would play.
But again, that is quite a typical thing for children anyway.
To play alongside,
because
right?
I've got two, typical children before I had Bailey Bo. And I know that my kids were very territorial regardless with their
Yeah,
toys and
absolutely.
sharing. And around that age as well, you don't really play with a child.
They don't.
You play
They do
side
call
by
it
side.
playing alongside.
So it's also very hard to work out whether it's just a typical
Totally.
growth or
And
something
sometimes when
typical
I would
development.
say about things to like family and stuff and say, oh, you know, he doesn't like this, or he doesn't like that, they'd be like, oh, it's fine,
Yeah.
you just grow out of it.
Yeah.
You grow out of it. So I kept quiet. And to myself, I said, you know what will be the telling point is when he starts nursery.
Yeah.
So if there is anything, they'll come to me.
Yeah,
They'll
agreed.
flag it. So I thought, fine. And anyway, so he started nursery just before he turned 3. And the first week, he did amazing, like going in, great, you know, just separating from me, absolutely fine. So I thought, this is brilliant, because I'd been at home with him for 3 years. So that was quite a big transition for him.
huge.
And he
So you've never
initially-
done a nursery or a childminder or anything for the first 3
So
years?
I used to work for the family business. My dad's got his own business, so it gave me the opportunity to work from home and be with Jack,
Fine.
which was great.
Lovely.
So that was a big transition for him.
Yeah.
But the first week he was great. So I thought, oh, brilliant. You know, this is going to be easy. Oh no.
They think
Obviously-
it's fun at the beginning. They think it's
and
like
then
a
he obviously
playgroup.
realised, hang on,
This is forever, or this is for a long time.
Yeah, like what? No, not having this. And that's when the separation difficulties started. Like, it was horrific. Like, absolutely, he would get himself so worked up. And then they'd say to me, you know, once you're gone, he does settle within 10 minutes, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay,
It's all for you.
fine. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine. And then he'd been there about 6 months. So they'd obviously given him time to settle, and they'd said nothing to me in these 6 months. Other than, actually, one thing I do remember is we'd had, like, you know, like the little parents' evenings. And I was so excited to go for like his first parents' evening. And I remember her saying to me, oh, you know, he's really smart. But she was like, oh, have you noticed? And at the time, it didn't even register. But now, again, having the experience and knowledge that I do, I'm like, she was so testing and feeling me out for my... Because
How
she was
far
like,
she
oh,
could
have
take
you
it.
noticed that he really likes to line things up? And he hasn't really made any friends yet, but he's playing alongside. Or, you know, he gets a little bit distressed from noise and stuff, so we take him outside. So she was obviously trying to... And I was just like,
Planting
oh, okay,
seeds.
yeah, he's a bit like that. I'm totally going over my head at this point. So... it was then about 6 months in, the manager of the nursery, and I'm still in contact with her now, you know, like just through social media and stuff. You know, she's lovely, and I owe so much to her. She pulled me aside and was like, oh, I need to have a conversation with you.
Did you know
And
that
do
it
you
was
know
going to
what?
be that conversation?
At this point, I'd started doing a little bit of research. I was thinking, you know, something, because he was still so distressed about going in and stuff. Right?
And what was he like coming home after nursery?
Exhausted.
Yeah.
And he was like just shut down, you know,
Yeah.
like he didn't want to talk, wanted his iPad, you know, and that was it. So I'd started to sort of do, and at the time, what was typically talked about was Asperger's. Now, it's not diagnosed as Asperger's anymore, but this was still quite known under that terminology at this time. And so I was a bit like, he ticks a lot of these boxes. But again, I'm not going to say anything. I want someone to come to me. And she pulled me aside and she was like, if you're happy to, we want to make a referral. You know, we've got some concerns around his sort of social emotional development. And I said to her, I said, look, when someone's talking to me, don't talk to me grey, talk to me black and white, tell me what it is. I need to know. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. I just want to know. So I looked at her, I said, do you think he's autistic? And you could see she was a bit like, and she was like, well, I'm not qualified to diagnose him. She was like, but I'm going to say this to your record. And she knew that she could trust me and we had a really good relationship. And she said, I'm going to say this to your record. She said, but in my 20 years of experience, she said, if you were to ask me if I thought he was autistic, yes, I do. She said, but I can't diagnose him and this is why. She said, he starts school next year. I want to support you in getting the referrals in place now.
I need to know what your emotions were like there and then when she said that to you.
Somewhat relief
Yeah.
that I'm not going mad.
Yeah.
Because I knew there was something.
It wasn't your parenting, it was something else.
And then I walked out, sat in my car and just burst into tears, just fell apart.
Yeah.
And obviously I agreed for the referrals. And so a lady came in and did some observations and she agreed that a referral needed to be put in for a multidisciplinary assessment. And at the time, I was living in Surrey at the time, and the wait list were around 18 months. Which in today's times is nothing,
Yeah,
right?
a breeze.
But then I was thinking, oh my God, he starts school next year. Like, I want people to understand him when he goes to school. And I remember going into work, I was working for Bupa at the time, and sort of fell apart to my boss, just like, oh God, you know, so overwhelmed with it all. And she was like, you do know that he's covered under your healthcare working for us and that we can pay for a private assessment. And I was like, really? She was like, yeah, gave me the number for the department to call. And they were like, yeah, we can do that. And within 4 weeks, they'd arranged the assessment.
Amazing. Because that's not the case anymore.
No. So it was, amazing. And within 4 weeks, we saw 2 clinical psychologists and psychiatrists who worked for the NHS as well, but worked privately. Yeah. And they did an ADOS assessment on him. Obviously, they'd got background information from me, background information from nursery. And he just said, there's no grey areas. He ticks every box. It's a very clear-cut diagnosis of autism. Yeah. And again, it is, you do go through a grieving process, because you think, well, what does this mean now? And you get a diagnosis and it's like,
bye-bye.
Here's a couple of leaflets, see you later.
It's the leaflets.
And, going back sort of 8 years ago, there wasn't the social media presence around neurodiversity that there is now. So it felt so alone. I had no friends with children who were autistic, nothing. And I was just
and you also had this group and you were probably the only one.
And I was on my own with him at the time as well. So I was single parenting and I was just like, what does this mean? What does this mean for our future? I was terrified. Yeah. I really was terrified.
We get it.
But I was kind to myself in that process. Thought, at least I now know. And that's the thing with me, I need to know. I can't bear the unknown. If I know that there's something around, I need to know everything. Yeah. So at this point, I thought, well, now I know.
And now you can help him.
Because when we were on that pathway, there's nothing, I'd have some days, if he had a good day, I'd be like, well, he can't be because I've had a good day today.
Yeah.
And then the next day, but if you have a good day, you've probably got about 3 shit days coming afterwards, right? And then I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe. So I was constantly, is he, isn't he, is he, isn't he?
Even after the diagnosis.
For a little while. Yeah. But then when you have that validation, you're like, I don't need to keep doing this anymore because you literally turn yourself inside out wondering, are they, aren't they?
I think that's one of the biggest struggles mentally for parents, especially if you have a child that already has a diagnosis and then you're going through the process potentially with the second. Yeah. So I know you've got 2 children.
Yes, yeah.
Did you ever, because I worry every single day of my life and Marley's 3.5 now, that there's still something and I'm still living what you were living. Did you live that as well? Did you kind of
with Esme? Or,
yes.
So Esme's 4 now and she's a girl. Her and Jack are polar opposites. Absolutely. But I don't want to be complacent with her. And it's funny because sometimes I'm like, no, don't look for it. You're looking for it. And then other times I'm like, I don't want to be shutting it down. Do you know what I mean? Because if she is. Yeah. The odds aren't in her favour. Yeah. Right? We're a very neuro-spicy family. So, there's some days where I'm just like, no, I don't have any concerns. And then I think with Esme, what stands out for me with her, she's got, sensory-wise, she doesn't care really about noise and stuff. She's very sociable, loves preschool, goes running in. She's got loads of friends. She plays with kids, But girls do present very differently. She's very particular with things like if she's watching the TV and you need her to come out of the room, she has to pause the TV. So there's little things.
My son's like that. He's got very little quirky things. But if I can just say, sorry, I think when it's someone like your daughter and maybe my son if we're trying to diagnose or not, or we don't know, I personally feel if it doesn't affect their day-to-day life, then I don't see a reason for it.
And this is, at the moment, do you know what? She's such a relaxed, happy girl.
So why put a label on it if she doesn't need it?
She doesn't right now, but it's something that I don't want to dismiss her
of course
at the same time. So for me, I'm just like, I accommodate the things that she needs, right? So she needs the TV pause because...
Who's it hurting? Who's it harming?
Fine. And you know what? Actually, if I was watching something and someone needed me to leave the room, I'd want to pause the TV because I don't want to miss what it is. So, it's just having that rationale with it, isn't it?
Confusing whether it's just her being a typical,
because sometimes you can
overthink everything,
and which is natural to do when you've been on the journey you've been on. And this again, so I'm really conscious of that. There are some things like with her speech that I flag on and which preschool have picked up on. So if she gets really she wants to talk about something that's clearly quite important to her, she really stutters and it takes her quite a long time to get her words out. And that could be a processing difficulty, or it could just be,
she's just super excited.
Yeah. Because once she's got her flow, She can be quite repetitive in her speech. So she will ask me the same questions over and over again.
Exhausting.
Weeks on end. And I'm like, we had the same conversation every day.
I know.
But again, that can be quite typical of a 4-year-old.
But I just think answering your question, Jay, just kind of like in my shoes, Marley, as kind of a bit like Jack, hit his milestones. He isn't sensory. No, sorry. He isn't. He is sensory. He's very sensory. Yes, he didn't like his spaghetti the other day, did he? We were on FaceTime together and he was like gagging at this slimy. I'm like, cool. He lines up toys. Right? Yeah, clearly my well, Josh said that as well, that he hates my spaghetti bolognese and one of my things. Yes. But even though like Marley lives in our world and he hasn't got learning difficulties, I know he has his struggles.
Yeah.
So answering you, Jade.
Yes.
For me, not that I want to label my children, because I really don't want any more diagnoses. Diagnoses.
Don't ask me to pronounce it.
Okay, fine. Diagnoses. I feel that for their education and being in a typical mainstream school, that if I leave it, and then the waiting lists are so long, we're waiting till secondary school now, and then he's got no support whatsoever.
No, you're missing the point of what I'm saying.
Go on.
It affects him because you can see the struggles in him
Marley's
daily.
having struggles,
Yes.
but like Esme's not having any struggles
I'm
at the
not
moment,
saying
no.
leave it if they're struggling. Absolutely not. You get on that phone and you make those appointments. But I'm saying if it's not affecting them on a daily life,
Fairs.
then
Yeah.
let them get on with it.
Yeah.
Just let them be. Yeah, absolutely. And
because
that's the thing, the minute
we can
anything affects
overdiagnose
her,
things, we can overanalyze everything, and we can say, oh, look, like if my son says something twice, I was like, did you not just hear me? Maybe his hearing's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can just, the list is endless.
Yeah.
I mean, with Esme, I sit on the fence. I'm not, what will be.
She's still very young.
She's Esme at the end of the day. She's great. She's lovely. She's happy. The minute anything starts affecting her, or I thought she's struggling, I'd be on
Then
it.
100%.
But, and that's the thing, girls do. They do present very differently. And then, so obviously, Jack got his diagnosis of ASD. Yeah. They said at the time that they noticed ADHD traits as well, but he was too young.
Yeah.
Fine. We then actually relocated to Oxfordshire, and he started school. He had a wonderful reception teacher, like literally this woman.
This is mainstream.
This was mainstream, and she was just literally, like, you'll never forget somebody. Like I will never forget this woman. Like even Jack still talks
like
about
a Miss
her.
Honey.
Yeah, like literally, she's just. I owe so much to her, and she worked with me from the moment he started. She had him in there, like he started in the September, and by the October.
So no EHCP.
No, because this is obviously he'd only just got into school.
Yeah,
so
he didn't even have the diagnosis.
And we'd only just moved. No, he had his diagnosis, but we'd just moved to the area as well. So he'd started school, and my view is I know he's going to need an EHCP, and she was like, that's fine, I'll do whatever I can. And so she was amazing at collating all the evidence that was needed. She put in the request, they agreed to assess straight away. And I'm going back again,
so different now,
8 years, it was very different. And I remember having the educational psychologist come in and assess Jack at school. And then they then invited me in to obviously for him to have like an interview, chat with me. And I remember sitting in this room with him and his teacher, and I said to him, I'm not going to let you leave this room until you agree that my son needs a plan. And he just sort of looked there and went, well, we better write a plan then, hadn't we?
Amazing.
And we sat there for 4 hours. He had
Wow.
this huge flip chart, and we had all these massive pieces of paper up against the wall writing out
So
what
I feel it's
wanted
just not
in his
like
plan.
that anymore.
You
I feel
don't
like
get that
it's
level
in,
of
out,
care
quick,
anymore.
Quick,
You
next
don't.
one.
I mean, I say, and sort of going off subject a bit, but when I work with clients now and they're going through the assessment process, I'm like, do not accept a team's assessment, because they are not going to be able to get a clear evaluation of your child's needs. And when I see EP reports that have been done via Teams or in person, it is a vast different,
you weren't best pleased with Callie's EP reports.
No.
But we'll go on to that in a bit later.
I mean, so
I'm going through the process
I
at
see
the
some
moment.
wonderful EP reports who've really got it. You see that they've listened to the parents, they've actually observed the child, they've carried out the assessments they're supposed to, and it's really reflective of the child's needs. And then we get some that they've even put the wrong child's name in it.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Or they've put him and it's a her. So I'm like, you've clearly copied and pasted. Like, this is awful. Like, this is so important.
You shouldn't be doing that job.
No, and the EP report is what fundamentally underpins your EHCP, right? So it's got to be good.
It's vital.
It is vital to have a good EP report.
These people shouldn't be doing this job if they don't take it.
This is it. So again, at the time when I went through it with Jack, you got that level of care.
Yeah.
You really, really did. So, we had an EHCP awarded, been in place ever since. And my view at the time, because I didn't have experience with specialist schools, was Jack needs to be in a mainstream school because he's very academically able.
Yeah.
And I thought as well, actually, if he's around neurotypical peers, Jack very much, he
Copies.
will copy what others do, and that's how he learns to be socially. He scripts a lot and things. So I thought if he's around typical peers, it's going to help him build those social abilities, right? doesn't always work like that. And I learned that sort of, a few years in. I mean, it took a while. And
I'm where you are.
Yeah.
I'm where you were, sorry.
Well, I found with Jack, so reception and year 1, he did really, really well because it's quite low demand as well.
And I think also, sorry to interrupt you, I think also the children are very unaware.
So accepting, right? So accepting. Yeah. And at the time, you could see differences with Jack to his peers, but it wasn't vast, and his peers had no idea of this. And we got to year 2, and I feel like, when I speak to a lot of clients, again, year 2, year 3 tends to be the catalyst. And we saw a real decline in his engagement into school, how children were treating him.
They don't have the patience as much as they do in reception.
No, they don't. Or they're questioning. When he was having meltdowns as well in there, he'd get really overwhelmed. I mean, Jack's never been a volatile child. His meltdowns are very emotional, just really sobbing, just
why
really.
Is this child getting more attention
and they
than
would,
we
and they'd
are?
be like, why is he crying over the fact that his yogurt hasn't been opened the right way? Do you know what I mean? It's those sort of things. And I think Jack's got the comprehension to notice these things as well, that I can't control
Jack
these things.
Always know that he was different?
I don't so much know that. I think he just knew that. I don't know.
Did he ever say, like, Mummy, why do I have someone that sits next to me in the class?
No. But I think boys, I think Esme probably would ask me that. Yeah. Boys just tend to roll with it. They're just like, okay, you're there to help me. Jack would still have me chew his food for him, given half the chance. Boys are lazy, where girls want to do everything for themselves. Yeah. So I think for that, it's like, great, someone's helping me.
Less work for me to do.
Brilliant. And then COVID hit. So, which for most autistic people was a dream. He loved it, lived his best. I'm going to go to school. He could have gone to school having an EHCP, but he wasn't going to cope with the change, right? So we're not doing that. So he lived his best life, loved the fact that people had to social distance, loved the fact shops were really quiet. He just didn't have to go to school. We attempted home learning because, everyone had to do the whole team, couldn't cope with that because having the laptop with all of his classmates within his safe space, no, we're not doing that. So we very quickly learned that homeschooling wasn't going to work. And for me to survive lockdown, I was not going to homeschool either. And I was pregnant with Esme at this time as well. Gosh. So I was like, no,
you deserve an award.
Yeah, so I was like, we're not. So actually, we focused on life skills in lockdown, which was brilliant because Jack was quite delayed in life skills like self-aiding off the toilet and things like that. So we were, and riding a bike. So we really worked on all those things, which really built his self-confidence as well. So he actually lived his best life in lockdown. We saw a really relaxed Jack,
and
which was great.
I'm sure he came out of nappies normal time.
He was like 2.5 when he was. All of those developments, no delays in any way. He's only ever been delayed socially and emotionally.
And that's the autism.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we noticed during COVID that there were differences in sort of his executive dysfunction. And we were like, is this
Can you elaborate on that?
So that's like, so he's normally very, like, he'd be very, remember to do everything. I've got to do this, very regimented with everything. Everyone used to call him the Time Lord at school. So he'd wear like a Casio watch. And if the teacher was 1 minute late from opening the gate, he'd be like, you're 1 minute and 29 seconds late.
Oh, wow.
Love
so
him.
She would literally sweat in the morning to get to the gate to open it in time. Like, literally. She knew. But those things all started to slip. And it was like, and he used to be an incredible drawer. And like, his handwriting was really great. And all these things started to decline. And we were like, is this because of COVID or is this something else? And again, it's mum instinct, right? And obviously I'd had on this in the back of my mind about ADHD because it'd been flagged. So he was already on the pathway with CAMS for ADHD because of the history. And we were looking at a 5-year wait with CAMS, and things were getting, definitively worse with him in that area. So we ended up going private for his ADHD assessment. Again, a very clear diagnosis of ADHD. And she said on his QB test that actually the highest you can score is 100 for inattentiveness, and he scored 100. She was like, wow. he could have gone over if there was a higher bracket. Like, outside of his interests, he's got an attention span of around 3 or 4 seconds. He's just going to disengage. So we obviously got that diagnosis.
How old was he?
He was 10 when he got that.
Fine.
So we had that diagnosis, and then since we obviously at this point we were having real difficulties with mainstream school. I'd moved him from the school that he'd been at to a smaller school and secured funding for a full-time one-to-one to see if that would work, because I knew it was very much about the environment with Jack, the busy classrooms, lunch halls,
that's always been
corridors, playgrounds, always been. And it just was getting, as he was getting older, the gap was widening with his peers, not academically, the social and emotional side of things. He was becoming very socially isolated, so I thought we've got to try something. And at this point, I still didn't feel specialist would be right for him, because my only understanding at this time was of specialist schools for children with very profound needs, which isn't Jack, or children with very significant SEMH needs, which is social, emotional, mental health, which have a lot of challenging behaviours.
It's quite hard to be in the middle, isn't it?
And Jack,
what's right,
Jack
what's
couldn't
wrong.
go to an SEMH school. He's such an anxious, timid child. It would absolutely terrify him. And, and that's not the children in those schools who are having a difficult time and do have explosive behaviours. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
But Jack that wouldn't benefit Jack in any way, shape or form. It would terrify him. Yeah. So I thought, where does he fit? And this is when we talk about semi-betweeners, and I know like, we've spoken about Lisa and stuff, there is very much a semi-betweener. So I was like, where does my son fit? So I didn't know what to do at this point. So we'd moved to a smaller school. We'd secured the one-to-one funding.
So how do you do that if one's trying to do that? Say they have like a one-to-one in a mainstream school and it's just not working and they want to go to a specialist school. How do they go about doing that?
So you would call an emergency annual review of the EHCP, and at this point your school ultimately would be saying we can no longer meet need. And at that point...
But what if they're saying they still can meet
Jack's
need,
school
but
did.
you don't feel that they
Jack's
can?
school did, and that I felt very... what's the word? I felt I'd had a really good relationship with the school that I'd moved him to, because the head that was there, I knew her from a previous school and she'd taken on the headship at this school. So I really trusted her and I really felt that she had Jack's best interests at heart. And then it transpired that actually I don't ever think that was really the case. Jack had a high level of funding attached to his EHCP, and this was a very small village school that could have done with that funding. Right? Because... So what happened was he had a one-to-one. The one-to-one was lovely. It was obvious that she was being utilised in other areas of the school at certain times. But you know what? It is what it is. There's only so much you can do to enforce that, right? So Jack had been there for about a year, and then it was the start of year 6, and we'd had a terrible summer with him. His anxiety was awful, and he'd lost a lot of weight. He was a shadow of himself.
Can I ask, was he medicated at this point?
He had been. So yes, we'd started ADHD. So this was the September, and we'd started the ADHD medication in the March. And we saw a real improvement in the executive dysfunction, but we saw that his autism traits very much come back to the surface.
They do say that you're just masking one and bringing out another.
It is. And then, I'll go back to the school journey, but to touch on the medication. So we had done that, and we tried stimulants, we tried non-stimulants, and we tried combined.
Yeah.
And actually it didn't work for Jack, because Jack was very great at articulating that actually he preferred living with his ADHD brain rather than his ASD brain, because actually his ADHD brain allows him to live more flexibly. Yeah. He's not so rigid about routine. He's not so rigid about change. He can still be a bit funny, but he can accept it better.
They're total opposites, aren't they?
It is. He's better socially. So for me as a parent, parenting ASD Jack is somewhat easier, right? Because he remembers stuff, I can stick to the routines. The ADHD Jack, I'm constant, you need to do this, don't forget to do that. Have you got the, I am his memory for him.
It's really hard for a child as well to have to sit there and say, what am I going to prefer today? Am I going to prefer to be autistic Jack or ADHD Jack?
But the fact that he had the ability to recognise that and say to me, actually, I prefer how I feel when I'm not taking my medication. Yeah. Absolutely. It's about him at the end of the day. It's his life.
100%. And amazing that he can articulate that.
It was great, you know, and I will always advocate and do whatever he wants, because ultimately it's his choice, it's his life, right?
100%.
So absolutely. So we'd taken him, we did end up taking him off medication. He's not been on it since. He takes natural supplements that work with anxiety, is magnesium. I know you're a great lover of magnesium.
Do you love a bit of magnesium?
I love magnesium too. So, he's on that. He takes lion's mane, and that seems to...
Does that help with anxiety?
So lion's mane is more for memory function.
Okay.
So although he is still quite, I have to prompt him and stuff, it helps at school and stuff, so that's absolutely fine. That's great. So going back to sort of the catalyst with school, so year 6, we'd had a really difficult summer with him, very anxious, hardly wanted to leave the house. He just was a shadow of himself. He just really wasn't Al Jack. And it was about a week into year 6, and we'd had an awful start of transitions to the point of one day they even actually physically manhandled him, like rugby tackled him into the school. And I was like, no.
Get off my child.
We're not doing this. I was like, you're coming home.
Yeah.
Took him home. The day that finished it for me was, so I kept him home for a couple of days after that, because obviously that was really, and he's he's
traumatic.
not a child to fight back, right? That's not in his nature. So I took him home, and we had what we call mental health days. Let's have a couple of days to regroup, and we'll try again. And I'd already been speaking to my husband about it, and I said, this isn't going to last, and I'm not putting him through this for much longer. And this one morning we'd got to the school, and I pulled into the car park, and he was literally curled up in like the fetus position on the passenger seat, sobbing, shaking, and said, "Please, I can't do this anymore. Don't make me go." And I was like, "We're not doing this anymore. We're not doing this anymore." I was like,
how supportive of you.
Yeah, I was like, I can't. When you see your child broken there, like I was just like,
yeah, but some parents wouldn't even do what you did.
No, I know, and I think
it's amazing that you've always had his back.
It's always been about Jack.
Yeah.
Always been about him. So I took him home and I said to him, "You're not going back." And he'd said to us a couple of nights previously, he'd got up and he'd, in the night, really upset. And he said to me, "Mummy, I don't think I'm going to survive another year." And he said, "I think the stress of this is going to kill me." And I was like, when you've got your 10-year-old, and he'd lost a lot of weight now at this point as well, I was just like,
that makes me
why are we doing this? We're not doing it for his benefit. This, he has got, I was like, no, we're not doing this. So we removed...
For a 10-year-old to have to come out and say that, and the anxiety that must go on in his head, and the worry, that breaks me.
Yeah, honestly, it's a time I often... It's very, very difficult, and I feel like I've locked it into Pandora's box. It's not very often I allow myself to think about it now, and I almost have to think, I can't believe we went through that. Like, it was such a dark time. So we removed him from mainstream school, and around 2 weeks after removing him from mainstream school, he developed this full body tic. Now, Jack had always had vocal tics. So whenever he'd get anxious and stuff, he would vocally tic. And we'd never really, we just rolled with it. It's part of who he is, it's fine. But he had developed this body tic, and it was like he was having a fit, right? And I called his GP was on annual leave, so I called 111 and they said, "Look, just monitor it for like 24 hours. If it gets worse, then call us back." Around 24 hours, he was having like over 200 episodes. It was, honestly, it was horrific, and he was so distressed by it.
Can I just... when you say having tics, and I know if people are listening and aren't watching,
so it's like
they
a
won't
full
be able
body
to
tic.
see.
If you've,
but is it like
like his whole body would jerk, his neck would jerk, and then he would freeze and like turn to stone, and his whole body would be like in like, and just distorted.
He couldn't stop it himself.
No, had no control over it.
Did he know that it was happening?
He could feel him building, and then he could do nothing about it, and then his legs were giving way, like,
and this happens
paralysed
when
him.
You're anxious, or
so the story that leads on. So obviously they got worse, and they were getting more distressed. So call back 111, and they're like, "We're going to send a first response car," because they could hear him really distressed in the background. They were there within minutes, took us to A&E, and they did all the blood tests to rule out if there was any infection, like what is going on, because they were really to watch as well. I was like, what is happening to my child? What is going on here?
Did they go a bit like delirious?
He was pretty with it. He couldn't speak when they were happening.
It was almost like his body was like shutting down.
Yeah, it was awful. And I think it will stay with me for as long as I live. The consultant said so all bloods came back clear, right? No medical indication of why this is happening.
Want something to come back.
So, and the consultant said to him, "Jack, what's going through your mind when these episodes are happening?" And he said, "I keep thinking of mainstream school."
Wow. It's actually given me goosebumps.
And the consultant said to me, looked at me and said, "What does he mean by this?" And I said, "Well, actually, we've had a really difficult time." Gave him the background history of school. And I said, "Actually, I recently removed him 2 weeks ago." And he said, "This is PTSD."
Wow.
So he said, like when a soldier is in fight or flight mode, it's not till they come home out of the war zone, they've got time to process it, that it starts to affect him. He said, but alongside that, they did give a formal diagnosis of Tourette's, because basically he's always, if you'd had prominent tics for 12 months or more.
Yeah.
And then he said, what this is what we call an acute episode triggered by PTSD.
Right.
So he's having these acute Tourette tic episodes triggered by PTSD. He said, and you are just going to have to ride it out. So they had to put him on diazepam in the end. So he was on diazepam for around 2 weeks, because they said, look, you are literally just going to have to ride this storm, and they should start to subside. So, and they did after around 2 weeks.
Did he completely change who he was on the diazepam?
He was just out of it.
Completely, yeah.
Just out of it.
Awful.
Yeah, just out of it.
No Jack, no personality.
He was literally just out of it for like 2 weeks. We just had to ride the storm.
Yeah.
In this time, I'd already put forward to my local authority, because Jack was classed as a phased transition then. So he had an EHCP, so you have a phased transition where they start the process a lot earlier for children with EHCPs to secure the placement for their secondary.
Okay.
And I'd already put forward that my parental preference would be for specialist. I didn't know where at this time. I just know he's not stepping foot in a mainstream secondary school. It's like you might as well throw your kid to the lions, right? Which just was never going to happen. And while he was laying in hospital, I got an email from my local authority saying, "Oh, it's been to panel," and they knew that he was poorly. They don't believe that he requires specialist provision. His needs can be met within a mainstream school. On top of that, his mainstream school was saying that they could meet need.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, right, okay. So they crossed the wrong mum at this point. I was like, no, we're not having this. And I even sent them.
What you've just been
I even sent all the senior leadership team, anyone who was going to listen to me, I sent videos of Jack in hospital. So I said, which one of you is going to take responsibility for this? I said, because this is where we're at because of mainstream school. I was like, this is not happening. I was like, absolutely. I said, and if the mainstream school, and we end up having a Teams meeting and I called out the school, I was like, so explain to me how you're meeting my son's needs when he's laying in a hospital bed right now, convulsing from PTSD.
And doesn't want to come in.
I said, and physically cannot come into your setting. I said, but you can meet need, can you? No.
Why would they say that?
Because his funding provided another member of staff.
Right. So it was benefiting them.
Yes. I mean, bearing in mind, he hadn't been in the school for over 2 months at this point, yet they were still receiving his EHCP funding and that member of staff was still there. So they knew that if they lost the funding, they lost the member of staff, right? And so it's just like, you're not working within the best interest of my child. You're working to your financial budget. This is not acceptable. But we never even got to the point of logging the tribunal because I think I unleashed such hell at this point that they were just like, make this woman go away.
But good for you. You had so much going on that you could let it out in a fight way.
Honestly, I was just like, this absolutely, over my dead body is my child walking to a mainstream school. It's not happening. I don't care what you say, it's not happening. Yeah. And whether I had to go to tribunal for that or not, but thankfully we didn't, and they did U-turn, and within 4 weeks they agreed to specialist provision.
Go you.
In this time, I'd found the independent specialist school I wanted him to go to, which is, again, when we talk about specialist schools, it is a very niche. So they are, again, so local authority maintained specialist schools are often SEMH or profound needs, where independent specialist schools, which obviously cost more money, are far more niche in sort of the criteria of children that they have. So like Jack's school that he's at, they're all very academically able, but they're all very sort of quite anxious profiles and stuff. So it's very small class sizes.
So suited to him then.
Yeah, and alongside the academic side of things, they do vocational, they do life skills. He is a different child to what he was 18 months ago. And if somebody had said to me 18 months ago he'd be where he is now, I would never have believed it. Like he's come on leaps and bounds.
He's happy.
So happy. And he loves going to school. Loves going to school. He gets picked up from a taxi. He has the same taxi driver who he's formed an amazing friendship with, picks him up every day. He flies out the front door, like literally.
And how lovely to be with other people that are so
He's made some really good
like-minded.
friends as well. He's made some really good friends as well, which is great. And
to not have to try and fit in.
No, and we've found as well that he, even at home, he doesn't mask nowhere near as much. He's so much more authentically himself because he doesn't feel the need
for our
to.
Children.
And he's so good at now sort of advocating his own needs because he's listened to rather than being shut down. So he now knows that his voice matters.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important. So, it is. He's a different child.
And I love that. And in a way,
amazing.
it is like
it's
a success story.
Yeah.
Hello, you. Hello. And it's,
I just want to hear more. I want to hear more success stories of people that stayed in mainstream because at the moment I'm just not hearing any. Because I am where you. I know I don't need to worry now, but I am where you were, and I had the same mindset as you. I always wanted her to go to mainstream school and follow that typical.
All the while
lifestyle.
she's happy. All the while she's happy.
And that's what matters.
Into school. See, with Jack wasn't.
But she's so in her own world that I don't know how much.
Yeah. We still had difficulties with transition. So he never went in happy. Like he was always,
Remember, every child is different.
No, I know.
Okay? They are, and that's the thing. I have got friends whose children have gone through mainstream school or mainstreams with resource bases. So they have that option of spending a certain amount of time within the mainstream school. But when things get a little bit too much or they need that little bit of extra help, they go into the base and they receive that and they've flourished. Right?
But all I am hearing, and I know every child is different, but whenever we've had guests on the podcast or on social media, that when they get into their specialist environment, they're just a different person. And it's almost now like, you're not you, just in general. I don't know whether I'm starting to feel guilty that I've placed her where I have.
But she's happy.
But she is so happy.
Yeah, and that's the difference. If Jack had been happy, and the thing is with Jack, it wasn't about the learning, it was the social side of things. And like, he can't cope with big, busy places, right?
With both our girls, a building could collapse in front of them and they wouldn't even bat an eyelid.
So he can't
so
deal with that. So
in that way.
had he have been really great socially, because there are autistic children really great. So I've got a friend who's got a son who's really social, like absolutely not bothered, and he's in mainstream with a base, right? And he's thrived. Had Jack have been that way, Jack would have absolutely done really well, because academically he can. It's just the environment. He can't deal with big class sizes.
But he's never been able to, as you said, even baby classes. Callie even now, Callie will go to a party and won't even know there's an entertainer in the room.
No, I couldn't even go to parties with Jack.
It just shows how different. You can't either.
I can't do anything, but that's another story.
You know, it was really. Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone's journey is different. And you will know, as her mum, you will know.
No, I know.
And I think regardless, everyone has mum guilt.
Of course we do.
And if it wasn't about this, it'd be about something else.
Of course.
So
no, you're right.
Give
you're
yourself
right.
a
You're
break.
right. Thank you.
And there's no textbook.
Thank you. So going on from your journey with Jack has made you where you are today. Your business is 1 year old now.
Yes.
Tell us about your business. Tell us about the name. Tell us how you help people, because I reached out to you.
Yes, you did.
During the whole EHCP process.
Yeah.
And you were amazing. And I highly recommend you to so many people.
Thank you.
But tell the people that are listening in a bit more about the business.
So Jack's journey led me to where I was especially fighting for the specialist provision, because I am diagnosed autistic myself, and it is very much my children are my hyper focus, right? So the minute I think I've got a MI5 research, right? And so when I knew, I was thinking, right, I'm going to have to battle for this specialist provision. I wasn't educated at this point of what rights are. I didn't even know of the Children and Family Act 2014. Okay, and the Children and Family Act 2014 was designed to support children with special educational needs. The Children and Family Act 2014. So it's a legislation, okay, that was passed in 2014 to support parents and children with special educational needs and their educational rights. Okay, predominantly around EHCPs. So I didn't even know that was a thing when I first started the fight.
We don't know that.
No, you do now.
Thank you.
So, you know, when I knew that I was going to have to battle for specialists, I thought, I need to know everything, because I need to throw everything at them. So I started and I enrolled on SEN Law training courses. So I've done level 1, 2 and 3.
Wow.
And at this point, I was like, I don't want another parent to have to go through what I've been through, either at all or on their own, because I know how overwhelming it is. I mean, I remember at one point thinking I thought I was going to have a stroke. I was that stressed. So I thought, let's see what I can do to help. I'm only one person. There is only so much I can do. But so I did all the training. I trained as an autism champion coach as well. I did lots of...
What is an autism champion coach?
So it's about basically
I like the sounds of that.
Getting people to sort of, you can go into school settings, and basically I could deliver training to teachers of how to support autistic children. You can go into workplaces and teach them how to support their, neurodivergent work staff. So it enables me to be able to write reports of recommendations of support for children, what they require.
Do you know what's really upsetting though? Do you know what's really, sorry to interrupt you, what's really upsetting is the fact that I'm going through the AHCP process at the moment, and 100% without a shadow of a doubt, my daughter needs an EHCP. I mean, it's not even a question. I know,
I've listened to previous podcasts and I know.
I mean, even you have to look at her, see her for 2 minutes and Yeah. The fact that I'm still going to have to fight for that makes me feel sick.
Yeah. You may not have to.
Well, Callie was the same. Ours got rejected the first time round. But when you've got amazing people like Amy...
Yes.
Yeah. And the SEN mummies, which I know are also helping.
And we've got something actually after Easter. We're working together on something.
I feel like you're working on some sort of collaboration
We are working on something together, which is going to be a wealth of knowledge.
Amazing.
For
that's so
parents.
exciting.
And it will be sort of advertised in the sort of late next month.
We'll look out for it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, without having these people like yourselves
I wouldn't
and
have
social media,
clue.
No.
And this is the thing is as well. Again, I suppose because I'm autistic, my theory of mine, I assume everyone knows what I know. So when I realised, actually, nobody knows this information.
God, sometimes you would voice note me and I'll be like, okay, Amy, break it down, honey.
Yeah,
You're not a clue what you're saying.
So then all of a sudden I realised, actually, these parents need help. Because there is nothing out there. Your local authorities certainly are not going to be telling you what your rights are. Half of them don't even know it. Right? The amount of times I've had to call them out on things and they're like, didn't even know this was a thing. And I'm like, wow, it's a thing. So, for me, it was like... what can I do to help? So yeah, I launched a year ago. I have been exceptionally busy since then.
It's fantastic.
I now work
because
full
you're
time.
helping.
I work full time doing it now. It's the first time since after having Jack, I went back to work, but only ever did like 3 days a week to have that balance. But I've been that busy, and I don't like turning anyone down, and I want to help everyone. That I work ridiculous hours now. Sort of 5 days a week, 12-hour days.
It's amazing that you can do that, but it's so upsetting that there's so many people.
This
that
is
need
it. Because
help.
people say to me, "Oh, do you love what you do?" No, because I shouldn't have to do what I do, but I'm very passionate about what I do. So that's the difference. I shouldn't have to do what I do.
We're just sitting here I know people can't see, but Sophie and I are just sitting here
just
nodding.
nodding.
We're like the dogs, the nodding dogs in the car.
I know, I feel like I need a neck massage after
Yeah,
this.
I know.
But I totally agree with everything you're saying.
And I think what's great, with social media, yes, social media can have a lot of negatives about it, right? But it can do a world of good.
All right, for one negative, there might be 3 positives. So
this
you
is
take it.
And I think, if you can use your platforms to help others and create that awareness,
It's not even the awareness now, I think, for us and for you. It's creating a community.
Yeah.
Creating...
Knowledge is also power.
Oh,
and I feel like
exactly.
even this podcast, like there's people out there that don't know that there's people like you out there that aren't big social media, like lookers, whatever you want to call them.
You can message us for her number, no problem.
And it's like, even something like this, you coming on might help someone go, well, I didn't know that, or I didn't know there was people out there that can help. No. And that's what's amazing. That's
and
why
the thing
we
is, parents
do it.
are led to believe, scarily by some schools, because schools are sort of governed by the local authority, so they'll kind of do what they're told.
Yeah.
And then local authorities will tell you what they want to tell you, it suits their narrative.
You have the child's best interest at heart.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. I'm here to say actually no, and the thing is, I'm not scared to hold them to account, because
I can imagine that.
At the end of the day, and I always say to parents, because I get a lot of parents that are scared, and I get it, right? You're going through enough as it is, but I always say to them, you are not here to be these people's friend. You are here to get what your child needs. And if you don't fight for them, no one else will.
Yeah.
They're not just going to give it to you and think, do you know what? I like the look of you, or I like the sound of you. I'm going to give you everything.
Absolutely not. And, and unfortunately, I work nationally, with lots of clients, meaning I work nationally with lots of local authorities. There are some a lot worse than others. I'm yet to come across one that works compliantly, but there are some that are better than others. And I think it also comes down to the individuals working in those local authorities, because I will get some that you can see genuinely have the best interest of the child, and they will work with you.
Sure, there's got to be some people that...
and want to help. And then you get some... that the way that they speak to these parents, they're like, who do you think you are? Like, they talk to you as if they're doing you a favour, and you should be grateful that your child is getting this. And I'm like, no,
there's
no
connection when it comes to the emotional side. They just say things as if your child is a thing or an object.
This is not a piece of paper. This is not an application. This is a real person.
This is a child's future. Your child.
And I just think, how can you go home and sleep at night knowing that you are being obstructive to a vulnerable child receiving the support that they have a right to?
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep at night knowing that.
Do you think it's up to them, though, or they have a...
Well, it's
guideline?
The thing is, again, so local authorities will have policies and procedures in place, and a lot of the caseworkers on the front line, they haven't been trained in the Children and Family Act. They've been trained in their local authorities' policies and procedures, so they'll tell you what they've been trained in.
Yeah.
And obviously, I will then be like,
in front of them,
absolutely not. And your policies and procedures will never supersede the law.
How do we change this?
She's changing it.
Trying to. The thing is, you have Send Reform, people that are doing great work. Yeah. There are lots of people out there raising lots of noises, but the ultimate thing is the education system needs to change. It's a one size fits all at the moment.
And what do you think? Do you think it will ever change? Honestly,
the thing is, I think
there's
the reason why
within it.
I don't even think it's that. The thing is, they've got money to do it. They just choose not to put it in it. But I think, who wants to take on the job of reforming an education system that's been going for hundreds of years? Because and the thing is, it's not fit for purpose. It's only designed to suit academic children. It's not designed to suit the children that are neurotypically different. It's not designed to suit the children that even are neurotypical but are not academic. We need to be offering vocational alongside academic opportunities, because not every child...
They're not offering for spectrum, basically. They're offering for one type of special needs.
Well, they're offering for one neurotype, but actually it's not even working for a lot of the one neurotypes either. There's children out there who are neurotypical that just cannot access their education because they're not academic, so they feel really overwhelmed, or they don't feel they fit in. So will it happen in our lifetime? I'm not going to hold my breath. Let's put it that way.
I
but all the
that.
while, it's not. You know, there are people like myself. There are other services out there, Send Mummies, which are great, that are doing all we can to sort of try and empower people and give these children the opportunities that they deserve.
And I think it's amazing what you're doing.
Really
I really do. There needs to be more people like you.
And I need to clone me.
Yeah, we need a clone 3 times over.
You need to train people.
Yeah, I know. This is it. My husband said to me, he's like, are you going to expand? And I was like, I can't employ people because I'm
too much of a control freak.
Yeah, and I'm like, if it wasn't done, I would think I would be an awful manager.
Fair enough. Listen, I love the honesty.
You can't delegate.
Because I would be like, you haven't done it right.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I couldn't cope with
I
that.
wouldn't like to work with you. Yeah. I think I've got a PDA profile. I don't like anyone telling me what to do and how things are done.
The thing is, I'm very much like, it's like if I was going to empty the dishwasher and my husband then said to me, can you empty the dishwasher? I can't do it now because you've asked me to.
Oh my God, fuming. Even the thought of it. Yeah, 100%.
I'm like, no, now you've asked me, I'm not doing it.
No,
I had every intention
agree.
of doing it, but now I'm not going to.
I agree. No, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to say thank you.
I could talk to you
It's been
for
amazing.
hours.
I
can't believe it's already
Can
been...
you tell that talking is my favourite habit, right?
I could sit here and listen and talk for hours because I'm just fascinated by you and what you do and how much you help and how much I need to speak to you after this.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah, you know
firsthand,
you
I
can.
can say Amy is amazing and she massively. I mean,
and you have to come
without
back
you,
on.
I don't think Callie would have got her EHCP. So
Bless you.
thank you, Amy.
No, you're welcome.
Thank
Very
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.